Hey, 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 welcome back. Welcome to today's live. I'm so glad that you are here with me this evening. I know that the spring season can be very wild when it comes to the sniffles and sneezing and the coughing and just the weather adjustments overall. So I think this is a really good time to talk about how we can get a head start on spring illness and prevention for our little ones. If you are new here on my live stream, I'm April and I help millennial moms simplify parenting through safety tips, product recommendations, and real talk. And that's what we're going to be doing this evening. So, welcome. Let me know if you're watching this live by commenting live in the comments. And if you're watching this on replay, then comment replay, and I will respond to you during the replay. So, I have a list of all the things that we're going to be talking about this evening, and we're going to be diving into some real important things, which are allergies, cold, and flu. Okay, if your little one is in daycare, they're in pre K, they're in school, they're going to get sick. And daycare cooties is much different than change of weather cooties. So, I have a child in pre-K 4. My child was in daycare, so I'm very aware that they kids just get sick all the time. And so I'm going to be sharing just some tips that has helped me when I noticed that my son was getting sick of exactly like what to look out for during the change of weather in the spring, how to prevent it as best as you can because nothing is 100%. And these are just some products that I always make sure that I keep around my house, in my son's bag, in the car, so that whenever my husband and I notice, or even if he's with family, notice that my son, who is 5, gets sick, we can just get a head start on some of the things that we notice that he has going on. So the first thing that we're going to be talking about when it comes to the cold and spring is common illnesses. Common illnesses. Now, I suffer from sinus, so I'm very aware that this is also the time of year where my sinuses will kick up. For me, my sinuses usually involve like getting a really deep inner ear infection. And so there are things that I've noticed over the years that's like, okay, I'm about to get a sinus infection. So when it comes to our children, especially if they're small, like in daycare or, pre-K or early first, second, third, sometimes it's hard for them to communicate what exactly is making them not feel well, what exactly is making them feel sick. So these are things that, we just have to look out for as parents. And we're going to dive into how to determine which one is which. My son has seasonal asthma. And so, for like the past 4 or 5 years, whenever he would get sick, he had to use a nebulizer. And so, one of the things that we just decided to do, his doctor was like, this has been going on since he was literally a baby. My son's a winter baby. So, that's what also led to, okay, these are common things that we've noticed that every year he gets sick with these symptoms. So now we know how to look out for these symptoms. And if you have children who have seasonal allergies, who have seasonal asthma, who catch flus and colds really, really often, then you know that there are just some ways and things that to look out for to know that if they are being triggered. One of the things that I think with small children is they can't communicate to you what triggers them because they don't really know what triggers them because they can't really determine what product or what they were doing. So sometimes, for example, if you know that your children are playing out in the park, we know that pollen is kicking up. When people cut grass, my eyes get irritated when there's freshly cut grass. So it's just things like that where like my husband, he'll know if we're driving and people are cutting the grass to roll the window up. It's the same thing to kind of do with children. So if you notice that your children are outside playing and they develop rashes, or if they put their hand on their face and it starts to break out in hives, these are just some indicators that they're allergic to something or something has irritated them. And that can be a really easy way to determine if they are catching something. Now, sinuses, allergies, flu, cold, they all have like the same beginning stages. So it's also a little hard to determine which is which. But if you find yourself saying, like last week, my son came home with a runny nose, or every time he goes and plays in the park near this area, he's always coughing and sneezing. Those are good indicators that something is wrong, and this will lead to their sickness. So now I'm going to go into how to determine the differences between allergy, cold, and flu, because as I mentioned previously, it can be very, very challenging for children under 5 to communicate this to you, because children under 5, they don't really have the language to explain what's happening to them. So you might see that their nose is running or that they're coughing. And at that age, things overlap. So if you've had a child in daycare, as soon as you put your child in daycare, they're coughing and sneezing. They're catching like the daycare cooties. Same thing happens in pre-K, because now you're getting a mixture of kids who were in daycare, who weren't in daycare, so they're still being incubated with all those germs. So in the very beginning stages of your child getting sick, you will notice all these things. Now, I'm not a doctor. Okay, I want to put that out there. I'm not a doctor. I'm just a mom who has sinus issues, and my son has seasonal asthma. So these are just some things I've noticed over the past, like my lifetime and my son's lifetime. So these are just tips. Okay, I'm not a physician, but these are just tips so that if you notice these things, you can be like, I heard that on April's live stream. Oh, okay, so this is what I should look out for. Fatigue is also very common with cold and flu, as well as some forms of allergies. So that's why it's kind of confusing to pick like which is which. But we're going to start with allergies. So allergies really involve itchy eyes, throat, nose, mouth. Sometimes it's a physical reaction you can see, so like mucus. Sometimes you can see like watery eyes, but there are no fevers when it comes to allergies. Usually it is a reaction that you visibly can see, and the symptom sticks around for a very long time. For example, when I mentioned that my son has seasonal asthma, every winter he was catching symptoms. So that's how you know it's not a cold or flu. It was never associated with a fever. Now, when he was much younger, like a newborn, he would get a fever, but at 5, he's not really catching a fever for when something triggers his seasonal asthma. And for us, we know, for example, if he is going outside and he's not buttoned up really well, that will cause his nose to run, and then we know it's a trickle down effect. Or if he's playing too hard and he's having, to take really deep breaths, we know that can trigger. So you'll start to notice that there are certain activities that are triggering the allergies or the asthma. So that's one way to look at allergies. It's seasonal and it's triggered by something, not by particularly someone. For colds, it's like the stuffy nose, running nose, cough, but this is associated with a fever, usually a mild fever, and there is a little bit of fatigue for small children, and this can last for 7 to 10 days. Smaller children, like I said, it can be a little harder to determine because they're running around, but when you notice that they're starting to slow down, that's when you know the fever is coming, and that's when it's a cold. Usually they're catching this from school. So if you notice that one of the kids was missing from their classroom, 9 times out of 10, your kid may have been exposed to what they got going on, and they may catch it because this is something that you get from someone. Cold and flu, you're getting from other people. Allergies, you're not getting from anyone. Okay? Flu. Flu has all the symptoms of a cold except it's the fever that's really going to trigger it in kids. For children, the threshold for fever is a lot lower. So anything like 100 plus, you really want to start giving them medication immediately. But you'll notice that your children are having chills throughout their entire body, and they have body aches and they have headaches. You might see them complaining or holding their head like, Mommy, my head hurts. You might touch them and they are really sweaty, but they feel cold to the touch. That's how you know it's in the flu category. Again, they'll be extremely tired, and this too can come from preschool or daycares. This is associated with like diarrhea or vomiting. And this is more common in the winter and the fall, but it can definitely kick up now just because we have the variation of some days it's warm, some days it's cold, especially if you live like in the Northeast where one day is summer and another day is winter. Children can get really sick with the weather changes if they're not being clothed well enough, okay? So to recap, just the differences: allergy, your child's not getting it from anybody. It's something environmental that is triggering it. So dust, pollen, grass, something else is triggering it. It's not person to person. Cold is usually very, very common. It's in daycares, it's in preschools. It's something that your children are going to catch. Same thing with flu. It's just with colds, they're not really getting like body chills. With flu, they are getting chills. So then the next step is, when would you call a pediatrician? If your child's fever is really like 99.9999 for a few days and that uh, Tylenol for kids is not working, you definitely want to call a pediatrician. Or if you find that the breathing is really irregular, they're getting chills, I would take that baby in immediately. I wouldn't wait the 3 days, but I know that there's certain thresholds depending on where you are and depending on how old your child is, the threshold before you can bring them into the doctor. So that's one thing to kind of keep in mind is fever, cold, chills over a long period of time is usually when you'll call the pediatrician. Also, if you have a rash with the fever, that is a red flag as well. If you see that they're lethargic or they're not eating, that is a red flag as well. And if you find that it's longer than a few days or it continues to happen, you definitely want to call the pediatrician, because flu-like symptoms are more urgent just because the fever is associated with it. As far as anything with allergies, that in the order of operations, flu would be the most severe, then cold, then allergies. So if you find that your child is not eating, you find that your child is at 99.99999%, and you see that they're sweating or they have chills or hives, that's when you call the doctor. Things that you can do at home: saline spray, but I am always a big advocate for using humidifiers. Humidifiers keep the air moist just enough so that if you are in the winter, you can get a hot air humidifier to really keep enough warm air in there, and that really helps dissipate anything from popping up. In the summer, you can use a cold air humidifier, and they do the same thing. At the end of this live, I will link the humidifiers that we use, and I will tell you this: over this past winter season, my son has gotten sick very, very minimally because we use the humidifiers. He hasn't really taken any cough medicine. The humidifier is really going to help keep the air moist and keep those kids from being sick for long periods of time. And there are so many kinds that you can get, but I will link the ones that we have used and that we still currently use. It is highly recommended. If there's no other product that you get for your child, a humidifier that's dual, where it does cold mist and warm mist, highly, highly recommended. Of course, you want to make sure you're keeping bone broth, apple juice, cut it with water, orange juice if your child will drink it. Take a look at the mattresses. That is another good indicator. If your mattress has a bunch of stains, from your child, like peeing in the bed, or if they sweat often, just really evaluate their mattress just to make sure that it's in good condition. We have tons of mattress covers and pads on our bed and our son's bed, and that really helps to protect the mattress. There's so many germs that's hidden in the mattress, so being able to protect your mattress and your child's mattress is also going to keep down the spread of germs. Allergy testing is really important too. As I mentioned, because my son was getting sick every year with the same type of symptoms, we definitely went to an allergist, and that's very helpful too, because you might think they're catching a cold, but it could be they have an allergy, and it's seasonal too. Over the counter meds are really good, but you definitely want to make sure you talk to your doctor before prescribing anything to your child that's like 50-50. If it's the Tylenol, the regular cold and flu medicine like Robitussin, that's fine. But anything like Claritin, anything where you're going to step it up a bit, you definitely want to call your doctor and confirm, because there's no point in giving your child Claritin and it doesn't work, because Claritin is usually for like allergic, right? So there's no point of giving your child Claritin and they have the flu. It might not be as effective. I think another thing to look out for when it comes to just your germs is having your kids use products like hand sanitizer, having them wipe their nose and wash their hands really, really good throughout the day does help too. I know in school your children are learning at this age, if they are 5 and under, to wash their hands after they go to the bathroom, but sometimes just make your children wash their hands like randomly. Like they were sitting on the sofa for an hour, go make them wash their hands. Just get them in the habit of washing their hands constantly, because that's going to also to help change the way that they look at their health and wellness. So it's great to have your kids wash their hands after the bathroom. They've been sitting there playing with toys, wash their hands. I also have hand sanitizer, so I'll make my son use hand sanitizer. Even though he's making a mess, it's him learning how to use hand sanitizer, because when you're traveling and you're not necessarily able to wash their hands, them understanding the concept of using hand sanitizer, even if they're like 3 or 4 or 5, that's also good too. There are safe hand sanitizers to use for your children. I will link them after this live as well, so that you can find the ones that we use. It's travel size and it's really, really good. It has enough in it so that your child is able to wipe their full hands with it. And my son definitely understands the concept of using hand sanitizer at this point. Prevention. As I mentioned, there's no real way to prevent allergies, cold, or flu, but there are some things that you can do in order to decrease the chances of it spreading or staying longer. I've already mentioned humidifiers and washing your children's hand more often, but also making sure that when you are teaching your children how to put their shoes away, you're picking a designated area that doesn't house a lot of dirt or grime. Also, if you have boys, I'm sure little girls do this too, but I wouldn't know. But I have a son, and so boys are just really rambunctious, and they're like, yeah, and they throw everything everywhere. So it's really teaching them too, like when they take off something, to put it in a designated area. That's to kind of help keep the area clean. That's kind of to help keep spaces cleaner, so you're not having to constantly wipe things down. Having your children take a multivitamin. Flintstones kids, I took it as a kid. They have chewables and they have the pills. That is a really good multivitamin. It also has vitamin D and iron in it. Those are really, really good to give your children to help keep their immune system up. Also, greens, incorporating as much as you can. I know little kids at 3, 4, 5, 6, they're not really eating their veggies like that, but my son likes asparagus. Sometimes he will eat a little bit of like kale and collard greens. So we will put a little bit of that on his plate and just hope that day he decides to eat it. There are other foods that will boost immunity as well, but the easiest way is those dark leafy greens and those green vegetables. If you can, it's a little hard, but if you can, you definitely want to make sure that your child is eating those foods that naturally have enzymes to help cut cold and flu as well. These are just a list of some must have products. I will list all of these in the description after the live stream. And I will put it as the first comment as well so that you can just click on it. But you want to get hyperallergenic wipes that are from Cottonelle. You want your child to be taking an immune support. There's elderberry if you're into that, but a regular multivitamin works. There's the nose Frida. I personally did not use that. I know some people have used it. If you like the and suck the boogies, that's great. There is one that you can use, and we did use those. The ones that are automatic and you just stick and it suctions out of it without you having to use little nose like that was gross. So I will put both of those in there because I know they're very effective, and depending on your child's age, you might not be able to use the electric one for like a 2-week go, and I understand that. Air purifiers, again, I will list the ones that I've used. There's also soft tissue and hand sanitizers for children that I mentioned previously. And then thermometers. Every time we travel, whether it's down the street or to another country, I'm always carrying a thermometer if we're going to be gone for long periods of time, especially because I have sinuses. And as I mentioned, my son has seasonal asthma. So you never know when we're going to go past something and it will trigger. My husband and I are pretty good at knowing that if, there are certain things that my son does where if he changes his behavior, then something's up. But having a thermometer can really help reinforce your suspicion if your child doesn't right away give you signs that something is wrong or they're not feeling well. And I will provide all the links below so that you can get them. When traveling, especially for long periods of time, I like to make a small little first aid kit that has Band-Aids, that has thermometers, that has hand sanitizer, wipes, toilet seat covers, just anything that I can think of that's going to really allow me to feel like I've sanitized as much as I can when we're out. It's not going to be perfect, especially if you're like at an airport or you're on a road trip. It's not going to be perfect, but these items really allow you to feel comfortable that you have done enough to prevent the spread of as many yucky germs as these kids have as possible. Okay. So, question for you. What are some symptoms that you are seeing right now in your children that now that you're thinking about as you're watching this, you're like, this does actually make sense, and my child does have these things going on with them? So let me know in the comments, and we're going to move on to our Q&A section, which is the most asked comments and questions that I see people ask other people online, and so I'm going to answer them right now. All right, so the first question that I see all the time is, how can I tell if my child's runny nose is from allergies or a cold and flu? And the answer is, if you see itchy eyes, red eyes, if it's something physical that you can see on them, rash, hives, watery eyes, those are allergies because they are not coming from something from another person. Your child brushed against something. For me, my eyes start itching with the grass, it's an environmental external contact of the skin or that was ingested that made your child cough, or sneeze. Okay, so those are allergies. Cold and flu is usually associated with a fever, it's associated with a severe running nose, or it's like chills, body temperature change. So those are the real differences. Think of allergies as something that you rub up against, and cold is if you can't come in contact with people. That's the easiest way to determine it. Also, for allergies, it's usually seasonal. So if you notice in the winter, your child are always catching a particular type of cold, or when they wear certain clothing they're getting this type of irritation, that is an allergy. But if you find that your child is always getting a runny nose, always getting 100 fever every time they go to daycare, then that is a cold or the flu. The next is it safe to give children allergy medicine like Claritin or Zyrtec? And you definitely want to talk to your doctor about that. Your doctor will tell you what kind to get, or they will give you a prescription that is for your child's age. Sometimes the over the counter stuff can be too potent for your child. Like, it makes no sense to give your child 2 tablets and they are 18 months old. So you just want to kind of check in with them first. 9 times out of 10, they will give you an alternative to Claritin or Zyrtec if your child's really small, or they will give a particular prescription for them to use that is the generic version of those two medicines. But for small children, I definitely would check with your pediatrician first. I wouldn't just go to the store and buy it. Even if they say it's for children 2 to 5, I would definitely check with your pediatrician before giving it to your child. What are the best ways to prevent kids from getting sick at daycare? Child, there's nothing you can do. Because even though you might do everything that is necessary for your children not to get sick, you can't control what other people and other children are doing. Some children come from multiple children household where the child ranges are from like a 16-year-old to a 6-month-old. So everybody in the house is constantly getting sick from different stuff. There is nothing that you can do. But what you can do is introduce routines so that when your children comes from those places, they're washing their hands, they're using hand sanitizer. Maybe it's changing out of those clothes and putting them into new clothes so that the clothes that they had outdoors aren't coming into the home, making sure that you're giving them daily vitamins. So there are things that you can do to help prevent them from getting as sick as possible. But child, if the cooties are going to get your kids, they're going to get them. It doesn't matter if they're in preschool or if they're in daycare. The cooties will come get your kids eventually. And all you can do is hope that the cooties don't stay long. They stay long enough and then they keep it pushing. But if your child is going into daycare, especially if it's a new baby, there's nothing you can do. They're going to get the daycare cooties. And that's it. Now, I do know as your child gets older, so like second, third grade, the chances of them getting sick start to dwindle because they build up enough of immunity of being out in the streets with the other kids. But if they're going to daycare and they're in like the early pre-Ks, they're just going to get sick. It's nothing you can do. You just hope for the best and practice good habits so that they are practicing it at school and then practicing them at home. And then the last is, should I keep my kid home if it's just allergy symptoms? And this is a personal decision. What we have done is we will follow my child's lead. So sometimes he's just having an episode, but his energy level is good, so he can go to school because it's allergies, it's not contagious. So he can go to school. You just tell him, yeah, he's having, this going on, and they understand, and it's fine. But if you find that your child is really tired or they're just not feeling it, I don't think it's a problem to keep them home. But if it's allergies, they can go to school. If it's allergies, they can go to school. But if you find that it's making other parents nervous, or if you find that the school is nervous, you can always just have your pediatrician send a note like, look, my child has this, that's why they have a runny nose from December to June. And there's nothing, nobody can do. So if you have found this live very helpful, I want you to let me know in the comments below, because that is it for this evening. That is tonight's topic. And I'm going to do just a quick recap of everything that we have discussed today about spring illnesses. So the first thing you want to do is understand the illness. So being able to determine whether it's allergies, cold, or flu. We went over how to tell the difference between if it's allergies, cold, or flu. And then we also talked about ways to prevent it with products that I'm going to link at the end of the live that you can get, as well as just practicing good hand washing and just overall hygienic things that you can help with your children by having them wash their hands, take off their clothes, change it to new clothes when they come from outside, things like that. But it's never 100%. We're just doing what we can to get it to like 80%. Okay. If you've learned something and you felt it was helpful, please make sure to like, comment, and subscribe to my live. I go live every Sunday with a new topic to help us mothers master motherhood. Next week's live stream, we're going to be talking about spring break and travel with children. It's going to be an Ask Me Anything. So if you follow me on Instagram or on Threads, I will leave a poll there of any question that you can ask me, and we will go over them in next week's live. I've traveled with my son to several destinations in the spring and summer. We went out of the country one year to Jamaica. We've been to Florida. We went on a cruise one year. We're going to Disney. So I've definitely traveled with my son in different life stages, and I can definitely share what has worked with us from driving by car and air travel as well. So I'm really excited about that. And also when we think about the spring break that's coming up, I know a lot of people have started to have spring breaks, but between now and the end of April, all the kids will have had their spring breaks. So we're also going to start thinking about ways of keeping our children interactive during that time. So just some really fun activities you can do with them, whether you're traveling or staying home with your children this spring break. So thank you so much for joining this week, and I will see you next week here on According to April.